June 1919. Europe struggles to rise from the ruins, yet inside the halls of Versailles there is no spirit of reconciliation, only calculation. The victorious powers meet for months to design a new order meant to guarantee security and, above all, ensure that Germany pays for reconstruction. When the German delegates finally receive the draft, they realize peace is not a full stop, but a sentence. Exclusive responsibility for the war, territorial amputations, extreme military restrictions, and a debt far beyond any realistic capacity to pay. In Berlin, the word that sets everything ablaze is diktat, a pact imposed without voice or defense. The war had ended, but humiliation was only beginning. And that feeling would shape the course of the century.
El Tratado de Versalles es uno de los más polémicos de la historia, como si fuera responsable de la Segunda Guerra Mundial, como si el conflicto entre Francia y Alemania hubiera durado 30 años.
The Paris Peace Conference opened its doors in January 1919. But not to everyone. While the United Kingdom, France, the United States and other victors debated Europe's future, Germany remained outside, reduced to a spectator of its own verdict. For 6 months, the Allies discussed how to redraw borders, reorganize empires, and finance reconstruction. There were speeches about a fairer international order, yet beneath the rhetoric lay a far harsher impulse to ensure that Germany could never rise again, at least not anytime soon. When the German delegation finally arrived in Versailles in May, it did so with the naive expectation of negotiation. Instead, it was handed a finished document.
Los alemanes, que pidieron el armisticio en noviembre de 1918, contaban con la mediación estadounidense para obtener una paz adecuada, pero quedaron pasmados cuando llegaron a Versalles.
Los alemanes no participaron en la conferencia. Fueron invitados de manera tardía, en mayo de 1919. En el Palacio Trianon reciben el 7 de mayo el proyecto del tratado. No pueden expresarse directamente sobre él. Deben hacerlo por escrito.
The War Guilt Clause, enshrined in Article 231, struck first. Germany was required to accept total responsibility for the conflict. It was not merely a legal formula, but a moral judgment, transforming military defeat into public disgrace and justifying every other sanction that followed. What came next proved even more devastating. Massive reparations, territorial losses, international control of the Rhineland, and an army reduced to a shadow. Shocked, the delegates requested revisions, corrections, a seat at the table. There was no room for any of it. The Allies wanted guarantees, not concessions. In Berlin, newspapers called it a diktat, a brutal imposition, a peace hammered into place. The young Weimar Republic, already unstable after revolution and the fall of the Kaiser, found itself trapped between a hostile outside world and a population that saw the treaty as betrayal. Protests united moderates and extremists under a single cry: humiliation. Thus, the peace table that was meant to inaugurate stability instead sowed resentment. It became the political soil from which radical voices would later promise to correct the insult and dismantle the order imposed at Versailles.
El Tratado de Versalles terminó con un documento largo y confuso que no satisfizo a nadie. No resolvió los problemas subyacentes que causaron la Primera Guerra y pavimentó el camino para el advenimiento del nazismo y una eventual Segunda Guerra.
It began with dismemberment. The Treaty of Versailles did not merely assign blame, it reshaped the European map. Around 13% of German territory and 10% of its population were cut away. Every line drawn carried strategic, economic, or symbolic weight. Alsace and Lorraine returned to France, settling a score dating back to 1871. In the east, the newly created Polish state required access to the sea, and the Allies provided it by carving out the Polish corridor, physically separating East Prussia from the rest of Germany. The city of Danzig, largely German-speaking, became a free city under international supervision. In the north, Denmark regained Schleswig. In the south, the industrial Saar region fell under French administration.
Tomados en su conjunto, los tratados concluidos después de la Primera Guerra redibujaron las fronteras de Europa, dividiendo el antiguo imperio austrohúngaro en estados.
Each territorial loss meant more than land. It meant coal, steel, ports, railways, tax revenue. And the mutilation extended beyond Europe. Germany's colonial empire, stretching across Southwest Africa, Cameroon, Tanganyika, and Pacific Islands, was divided among the victors. Overnight, Germany ceased to be an imperial power without even the right to negotiate the future of its own colonies. Yet the deepest blow was not economic. It was existential. Millions of Germans awoke under new flags. Families were split, trade routes severed. Cities accustomed to looking toward Berlin were now forced to turn toward Paris, Warsaw, or London. The nation suddenly felt reduced, fragmented, unrecognizable. Geography became psychology. In schools, children studied a map different from the one their parents had known. In cafes, veterans and workers repeated that Germany had been strangled. A country that once aspired to stand among the great powers now felt confined and stripped of any colonial horizon. Versailles did more than redraw borders. It crushed national self-confidence. The reorganization was total.
Finalmente, Wilson afirma que para solucionar las cuestiones coloniales, el punto de vista del colonizador debe ser igual de importante que el del colonizado.
En París, expertos e intérpretes volvieron a dibujar los mapas mundiales, y los pueblos que lucharon del lado de los aliados pidieron un debido reconocimiento.
Another central pillar of the treaty was economic reparations. At Versailles, the sum was fixed at 132 billion gold marks. It was not merely a colossal number, it was a political statement. The Allies intended to fund reconstruction from the defeated nation's pocket and to ensure that Germany felt, day after day, the cost of having challenged the European order. For a country exhausted after 4 years of blockade, rationing, and internal debt, the bill was simply unrealistic. The Weimar government attempted to comply. It paid in coal, timber, and machinery. It paid in cash while it could, borrowing, printing money, hoping the global economy would recover. but the pressure proved unbearable. Post-war recession merged with political uncertainty, and in 1923 everything exploded. Hyperinflation turned money to ashes. Wages lost value between morning and afternoon. Savings evaporated. Pensioners were reduced to poverty, and workers were paid in wheelbarrows of banknotes worth less than the paper they were printed on. The resentment toward the treaties only deepened.
El rechazo del Tratado de Versalles es unánime. Realmente hubo un consenso sobre la imposibilidad de ese tratado. Un rechazo que se expresa desde la toma de conciencia de las condiciones del tratado y que se prolongará más allá de su firma y de su ratificación. El tema de las indemnizaciones, que será extremadamente abrasador, será como la serpiente de mar de la República de Weimar.
Everyday scenes captured the disaster better than any statistic. Children played with bundles of cash as if they were bricks. Shopkeepers changed prices several times a day. Families burned banknotes for heat. The crisis became a brutal lesson. Democracy seemed powerless, politicians incapable, and the international system deliberately cruel. Tensions climaxed when France and Belgium occupied the Ruhr to collect by force what Germany could not pay. Miners responded with strikes and sabotage. The government printed vast amounts of money to support them. The economy, unable to breathe, collapsed. The experience left deep scars. In factories, resentment hardened into ideology. Among conservative elites, humiliation turned into a desire for authoritarian restoration. For unemployed youth, desperation became fertile ground for extremist speeches, offering a clear enemy and a redemptive promise. The impossible bill did more than shatter economic stability. It destroyed faith in moderation and opened the door to those who promised vengeance instead of balance.
Mientras tanto, los problemas económicos de Alemania, exacerbados por la carga de las reparaciones y la inflación general europea, desestabilizaron al gobierno democrático. El resentimiento duradero del Tratado de Versalles dio masivo apoyo popular al Partido Nacional Socialista y otros partidos radicales de derecha a partir de la década de 1920.
Finally, a third pillar completed the treaty. For the Allies, lasting peace required stripping Germany of offensive capacity. For Germans, the result felt like symbolic and strategic mutilation. Versailles limited the Reichswehr to just 100,000 professional soldiers, abolished conscription, and eliminated tanks, aircraft, and submarines. Strict controls were imposed on heavy artillery, and entire regions, especially the Rhineland, were demilitarized.
Now, the French priority was security. France had suffered enormous economic destruction and loss of life during the war, and had now been invaded twice by Germany in the past 50 years. They wanted to continue the alliance with the US and Great Britain, to be compensated for the cost of the war, and they wanted Germany to be as weak as possible. Now, Prime Minister Clemenceau was firm, but open to compromise on the details, but General Foch and President Poincaré were much more hawkish.
For a society that had experienced the war as a national sacrifice, watching its army reduced to a skeleton was a deep wound. Decorated veterans were left without a future. Officers shaped by Prussian tradition saw military prestige vanish. The image of a defenseless Germany, powerless before neighbors who maintained full forces, settled in as a collective trauma. Yet beneath the surface, history took another course. The German General Staff, officially dissolved, continued through informal networks. Secret agreements with the Soviet Union allowed pilots to train and tanks to be developed beyond Allied scrutiny. Young officers absorbed defeat as a bitter lesson. Future German policy must restore honor and rearm at any cost. In everyday life, vulnerability became a constant undertone. If France chose to occupy German territory again, as in the Ruhr, Germany had no military means to respond. That asymmetry fueled a discourse of legal injustice. A sovereign nation reduced to impotence, denied the dignity afforded to its peers. Although the League of Nations was created to prevent such imbalances and avoid future conflicts through cooperation and peaceful dispute resolution, it inspired little trust among Germans. They believed the Allies held the power and could act against them at any moment. Thus, military humiliation combined with clandestine resistance to form a political culture obsessed with revenge. For thousands of embittered veterans and young men without prospects, any force promising to restore the army, and with it national pride, became an appealing alternative. Versailles did not simply disarm Germany. It planted the desire to rearm.
El 30 de enero de 1933, Hitler toma las riendas del gobierno con un programa que aboga por el regreso de la Gran Alemania y la abolición del diktat.
Todas las diferentes etapas de revisión del Tratado de Versalles que Hitler y su gobierno ponen en marcha reforzarán la popularidad en la sociedad alemana.
The Treaty of Versailles was conceived as a definitive attempt to close the era of European power conflicts. Yet its punitive design produced the opposite, a political and emotional ecosystem where resentment became a historical engine. Germans received not only economic sanctions, territorial amputations, and a reduced army. They received a narrative casting them as sole culprits of a war that had devastated the entire continent. That combination proved toxic. In ceded regions, German minorities faced identity tensions. In industrial cities, workers endured crisis after crisis. In the countryside, inflation wiped out savings and eroded trust in the state. Weimar was born weak, besieged by extremists on both right and left, by failed coups, by inflation devouring public patience. Democratic politics, rather than appearing as a solution, seemed incapable of defending national dignity. In that climate, revising Versailles became a unifying program. Monarchists, nationalists, ruined workers, and veterans shared a common conviction. Germany had been unjustly punished and must reclaim what it had lost. Moderates advocated peaceful revision. Radicals demanded total rupture. When the Great Depression struck in 1929, mass poverty and unemployment accelerated the collapse of faith in Weimar. The extremist message, restore borders, rearm the nation, erase humiliation, gained force.
Con el advenimiento de Hitler al poder, Alemania abandonó la Sociedad de Naciones, dejó de pagar la multa de guerra y con ese dinero financió su rearme militar. Así, el Tratado de Versalles quedaba abolido de facto y el nazismo comenzaba la carrera expansionista que desencadenaría la Segunda Guerra Mundial.
The rise of Nazism was not inevitable, but Versailles created the conditions that allowed it to present itself as a seductive option. Hitler turned every clause of the treaty into a personal and national insult. He used resentment to unify a fractured society and transformed grievance into political project. The promise to break the diktat became a winning slogan. Thus, the treaty meant to guarantee lasting peace, instead forged an unstable and deeply emotional order. What was signed in 1919 was not an ending, but a prologue. Europe did not yet know it, but the next war was already being rehearsed. Versailles sought to close an era of bloodshed through sanctions, rigid borders, and exemplary punishments. Instead, it produced a decade of open wounds that taught millions to see politics as revenge. Germany saw its map reduced, its army shackled, and its economy turned into a laboratory of suffering. Humiliation became identity, and the future was imagined as retribution. In the sound of money disintegrating and in endless bread lines, a narrative took shape, transforming peace into grievance and grievance into project. The lesson endures. A peace imposed without integration or dialogue can, unintentionally, write the script of the next catastrophe. Thus we reach the end. If you enjoyed this video, we invite you to join us in our next installment.